If Batman is the hero Gotham deserves, well, I just feel sorry for Gotham. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, where today's episode is gonna get real. Not like Hellman's Mayo real, I mean comic book movies getting real. Seriously, even though it seems like it really shouldn't matter whether comic book superhero movies are realistic, it's been all the rage for literally the last decade, and it's made a huge difference in the way we see movies made about men in spandex tights. Comic book movies used to be the center of everything cheesy, campy, and overblown, but now every time you turn around there's another alcoholic Jessica Jones or debate about the ethics of Superman as a godlike being. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy it, it's just that this stuff is intense. And at the center of it all is Batman. Or should I say, Batman. That's right, gritty realism has been right next to the batarangs and grappling hook on Batman's tool belt ever since Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy took superhero movies from this to this.
Where are we?
And that's a good thing. I love the Dark Knight trilogy.
Gotham is yours.
Well, most of it anyway. Because, simply put, for being the films that defined what realism means in comic book movies, the ending has a huge mistake. A mistake that puts Batman's hero status into serious question. From here on out, hitch up your spoiler pants, because today we're talking about the ending of The Dark Knight Rises. At the end of the movie, Batman stands victorious. Bane has been defeated, and Talia al Ghul has died her dramatic death. Only one major threat remains, but it's a doozy, a nuclear bomb set to flatten Gotham. As the timer ticks down, Batman rushes to fly the bomb out over the water to a safe distance where it explodes. City saved. Batman is a hero. Except that's actually not what would happen. If the movie was truly adhering to realism as strictly as Christopher Nolan intended, Batman would actually have failed in his attempt to save the city. Let's look at the facts. To show you what I mean, I have to tell you some more about nuclear bombs. I've actually had the chance to visit one of the world's real nuclear weapon sites in Hiroshima to do research for this kind of episode, and these weapons are incredibly serious. Neutron bombs, like the one shown in Batman, work by shooting incredibly high-energy neutron particles to specifically cause radiation damage. To know how strong a bomb is, you look at its yield, which tells you how much regular TNT it would take to achieve the same blast as the bomb. The neutron bomb from Batman is a 4-kiloton weapon, meaning it would take 4,000 tons of TNT to get the same blast. That's 8 million pounds of TNT. To give you a comparison, the Hiroshima bomb was between 12.5 and 15 kilotons. So this one is actually quite a bit smaller, about a third of the size. Fun fact, or maybe not so fun fact, believe it or not, there have been much bigger bombs made and tested over the years, up into the megaton range, 100 times the size of what was detonated over Hiroshima. So to the movie's credit, it actually does a good job of using a much smaller bomb relative to how big these things can get. That being said, though, they're still far from me letting them off the hook. The other thing about neutron bombs that makes them special is that they give off about 10 times the neutron radiation of a fission bomb of the same size. That means that instead of most of the bomb's energy just being a regular blast, a lot more of it is specifically radiation energy, which is longer lasting and harder to contain. So even though the Bat Bomb is smaller than, say, the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, inside the blast radius, uncontrollable radiation would make it much more deadly. So how big exactly is that blast radius? Well, the movie actually tells us that it's 6 miles, or about 12 kilometers, so we know how far we need to get the bomb away from every other person to avoid major casualties. The end of the movie is trying to do this when we see Batman tow the bomb out to sea with his Batcopter thing, but there are a lot of problems here. The first and most important is time. Let's break it down. When Batman attaches a harness to the bomb, we see that it has 1 minute and 57 seconds left before detonation. Then, he wastes a bunch of time macking on Selina Kyle and having a heartfelt goodbye with Commissioner Gordon. Factoring in this hanger, hanky-pranky into the countdown, he has just 75 seconds to get that bomb as far away from Gotham as he possibly can. So, let's assess how he does. Let's assume that Batman's Batcopter is as fast as the fastest helicopter in the world. This would make it the Eurocopter X3, which can achieve an absolute max flight speed of 293 miles per hour. It takes the helicopter a minimum of 20 seconds to achieve that max speed. Except, even though the Eurocopter X3 is a really fast helicopter, Batman won't be flying at top speed until he clears through the buildings in the city. You can even see how he's slowly lifting the bomb up and dragging it along the ground, even having to blow up and fly through buildings. How long does it take him to get out of the city? Factoring in only the time we see him flying on the screen, it takes him 38 seconds to get out of Gotham. We'll be generous in our calculations here and say for that time, he can fly at 50% of his top speed. I mean, it's pretty clear that he isn't going anywhere close to 146 miles per hour, half of our 293 top speed, since you can see him struggling to lift the bomb, it's hitting things, etc., but hey, we'll give the guy a fighting chance. This leaves him with 37 seconds at top speed, beginning right here. Based on all these factors, and with the odds heavily stacked in his favor, the Batcopter would be able to fly only 3.1 miles away from the city before detonating over the water. Looking back at what the movie tells us about the blast radius, 6 miles. It's clear that Batman can't make it out far enough to even save Gotham from the basic blast. Batman is a very different type of superhero. And let me reiterate, our assumptions here are really generous. When planes and helicopters are loaded down, they accelerate and fly a lot slower. Remember that the Batcopter would be carrying a huge payload. Atomic bombs typically weigh between 5 and 20,000 pounds, including their casing. And even though this bomb is small, we can expect it to easily clock in at around 3,000 pounds. Weight that we weren't factoring into the calculations at all. That kind of weight isn't too heavy for the Eurocopter X3 based on its tech specs, but it's over a third of its total capacity, meaning that it would definitely slow down the flight based on weight and wind resistance. But okay, let's take it to the extreme. Just for funsies, let's see if there was ever any chance of this scenario being even a little bit accurate, because I like Batman, and math is fun. Let's assume that not only is the bomb weightless, but Batman hitches it to his fastest in the world Batcopter, already somehow going at top speed, and it doesn't take any additional time to change the height of the helicopter in the air. If we basically ignore the laws of physics to make all this happen, you come out with a different distance. Batman would be able to travel, drumroll please, 6.1 miles offshore.
Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
Technically just edging out the main blast radius of the bomb. So, I guess technically there was a way to fake it to make it look like it works. Even in this scenario, not exactly. Because the Batman bomb is a dirty bomb, and that means you need to factor in radiation. To understand what happens in Gotham when the bomb doesn't make it out of town, we'll go back to our original calculations where Batman makes it a little more than 3 miles off the coast. To figure out what kind of damage the bomb causes from there, we have to be clear about where Gotham is. Technically, it's a fictional location, but there are plenty of clues in the Batman universe that give a good indication of what real-life city it's based on. Gotham City is a nickname for New York City, first used back in 1807. Batman's writer Bill Finger also originally meant for Batman's location to be New York, which is why he chose the name Gotham. And the city used as a stand-in for Gotham in The Dark Knight Rises is New York City. And if that's not enough evidence for you, well, sorry, geez, face the facts, it's true, but okay, fine. You can tell that this is specifically Manhattan when you see Bane destroying all the bridges into town. I could go on, but really, there is no debate here. Why does this matter? Well, knowing that Gotham is roughly New York tells us a lot, especially about where Batman is going with the bomb. If Batman is starting in Manhattan, we know that there's only one direction you can go over Manhattan into the water, south. With that, we now know Batman's trajectory, and all that's left is for us to pinpoint the area 3.1 miles off the coast and figure out what would happen if you detonated a 4-kiloton nuclear bomb there. Unfortunately, modeling a nuclear bomb is incredibly difficult. Remember, there are a lot more factors in a dirty bomb than a regular explosion. There's the fireball, which is what creates the mushroom cloud that we associate with all the old footage of nuclear bombs. Then there's the physical blast radius, which is the actual shock wave that blasts through buildings and breaks glass. And finally, there's the nuclear fallout, which can travel massive distances and cause damage for years, decades to come. Luckily, I don't have to model out this explosion on my own because the internet can do it for me. Believe it or not, there's a site called Nuke Project that raises awareness for how destructive nuclear weapons are that actually lets you model the damage a nuke would cause anywhere in the world. Yeah, this is one of those nightmare fuel websites. Don't want to play with this one before going to bed or in the airport like we were when we were working on this episode. I've got to be on some watch list somewhere at this point. Anyway, you can't put in every factor, but we can put in a few, including including where the bomb goes off and how much it weighs. We know that the blast radius will already be 6 miles, and the model tells us that close to the center of the blast, we're looking at a 50 to 90% mortality rate. So what happens? At 3.1 miles offshore, buildings in Jersey City, Brooklyn, and Staten Island would instantly collapse. Everyone from the bottom of Staten Island to northern Manhattan would have third-degree radiation burns. Even though the fireball would be mostly contained in the water, our model does show that almost 6,000 people are going to die immediately, with another 245,000 people being injured from collapsed buildings and radiation. It's important to remember, too, the bomb doesn't have to go off in the water for that to happen. The most famous devastating nuclear explosions, like the one in Hiroshima, didn't happen with the bomb on the ground. It happened when the bomb exploded 600 meters above ground level. Just like in our scenario with Batman, the bomb exploded in midair, which was actually more destructive than it might have been on the ground. According to this simulation, even structures that weren't destroyed would take damage. As far as Queens and northern Manhattan, all the windows and car windshields in lower Manhattan would break, the Empire State Building would literally sway, and the Chrysler Building would have floors of broken glass. People would die across 3 boroughs of the city. And believe me, I'm not saying any of this lightly. This is incredibly scary stuff, and it gets worse. When a nuclear reaction doesn't have any shield, it creates what's known as fallout. Maybe you've heard of this. They've made a really obscure video game series about it. I don't know. In a very basic sense, nuclear fallout is residual radioactive material that's blown into the atmosphere, then falls out of the sky after the explosion and shockwave are gone. In our model, the fallout from this explosion will go the way the wind is blowing or water is flowing. Luckily, most of the water flows out to the ocean, along with the rest of the tin cans and dead bodies that are floating in the East River pretty much most of the time anyway. And I say luckily with a huge grain of salt. That radiation is going to contaminate the ocean for years, and with it all sea life, which will eventually make its way back to humanity. But what we're most interested in is the wind. The wind is a whole nother story. In Manhattan, wind patterns could carry radioactive dust, ash, or even black rain. Literal black rain. Rain that is black. All the way up the island and out into as far as Connecticut. And don't think you'll escape it by taking a weekend at the Hamptons, because this stuff can literally last for years. Cancer rates in the city would potentially skyrocket from the air and radioactive drinking water, and child birth defects would show up all over Manhattan. Not that you'd be able to get out of the city anyway. Remember, in this scenario, there are no bridges intact out of the city, and no way to evacuate Manhattan. Everyone is gonna be there stuck in lockdown, in a radioactive field for weeks. And here you thought the Dark Knight trilogy was dark before. But let's rewind and see if there was anything that could have been done to save the thousands of Gotham lives that were lost. Believe it or not, all of this could have been avoided. Let's say that Batman doesn't waste the 42 seconds on goodbyes with Catwoman, or this tearful farewell with Commissioner Gordon. I mean, they don't even make sense anyway. It's not like he kills himself. He ends up with Selina Kyle and could have just sent Commissioner Gordon a postcard saying, "Hey, sup, I was Batman the whole time. Psych." So let's say that instead of wasting time that could have been spent, disposing of a massive nuclear bomb, Batman actually, did his job and used all that time to haul away the bomb a little bit further. Now he has a whole other 42 seconds to travel at top speed in the Batcopter. So bringing back our first model, he now has 81 seconds over the water, more than double what he was doing before. Doing the math, that would put Batman safely at 6.6 miles away from the coast, now outside the blast radius with room to spare. In this scenario, Batman almost clears the outer boroughs, and we still have about 1,000 casualties, but deaths have been reduced by 75%. Injuries are reduced 83% to about 24,000, which is still a lot, but it's happening in boroughs that are much easier to evacuate and keeps Manhattan almost completely intact. If we give him our super scenario where he isn't slowed down at all, he can actually get a whopping 9.5 miles away, well out into the ocean, where yes, the bomb is still going to take out a lot of fish, but humanity will actually be saved with 0 casualties and no injuries based on the model. The extra 42 seconds Batman should have spent in the air cost Gotham over 4,000 deaths and literally hundreds of thousands of injuries. All of them could have been saved if Batman had just kept it in his pants or his rubberized codpiece. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut.